Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In this video we're going to be taking a look at Ciaran Carson's poem Belfast Confetti, which is part of the EdXL Conflict collection, but you might be studying it with a different exam board. This video is going to take you through 5 key quotations from the poem. I'm going to give you some analysis detailing language structure and form and its impact on the reader. If you want form in more detail or you need information about the context of the poem, do check out my other video that you'll find in the playlist. But for now, grab your flashcards and let's get started. Okay, so let's start by looking at the opening of the poem and, of course, the title, Belfast Confetti. Brilliant, because there's a lot to say about the title, and you don't need to learn that as a quote because it's there for you already. But immediately we are being introduced to the kind of violence of the poem, the creation of conflict. Now, Belfast Confetti, there's a sort of irony to this metaphor, this idea of a bomb being like confetti, because of course confetti is celebratory, isn't it? It's what you throw at parties, at weddings. But there's also something very kind of light about it. But in this case, the confetti, it's actually slang for a kind of homemade bomb, homemade like a missile, which is what is then described in the opening of the poem, which we'll look at in just a second. But also, if you think about the notion of confetti, when you fling confetti around, it goes everywhere. It's really far-reaching. So this metaphor, this ironic metaphor, is also making a comment about the scale of the destruction as well. Okay, so let's get into the first couple of lines. Suddenly, as the riot squad move in, it was raining exclamation marks, nuts, bolts, car keys. Now, look at this. We're starting in media res, which means in the midst of things. So it's right in the middle of the action, which means that the reader is being transported into this conflict as well. And the sense of pace is also created because of that adverb of manner, suddenly, starting off the poem. So as the riot squad move in, so again, notice language that very clearly demonstrates to us that this is about conflict and about fighting. And then we get this metaphor, it was raining exclamation marks. So the idea of the rain coming down is it's actually the destruction pouring down. But again, notice how all-encompassing that metaphor is. And what is it raining? It's raining exclamation marks. Now, this is the first of many metaphors, so we'll call this an extended metaphor, where the writer is using a variety of punctuation marks to describe the destruction and the bombs. And really what this is about is talking about how, well, what does punctuation do? It marks, doesn't it? It, like something like an exclamation mark, for example, it will mark the end of a sentence, but it will also mark like high drama, high tension. So the fact that the bomb is described as raining exclamation marks is all about not just the destruction, but the huge wealth of feelings, the emotional distress that comes with it. And then this metaphor is then unpacked when we have this asyndetic list. So asyndetic means without and, okay? Now you can just call it a list if you want, that's fine. But if you want a little bit slightly fancier terminology, you can say asyndetic listing. And it's syndetic listing when there are lots of ands. But nuts, bolts, car keys. Now what you'll notice here is that these are all domestic items. So it's alluding to the fact that a lot of these bombs were made, they were homemade, and they were made from this kind of everyday material. But again, it's also about the impact of conflict on the ordinary life, that there is a blur between domestic life and violence. Really powerful opening. Okay, now you'll notice that what I'm trying to do when I'm doing the quotes, and you wouldn't do this in the exam, but I just want to be able to talk to you about how it looks on the page, is that we've got, we've got these sort of fragmented lines, lots of enjambment, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's all about that idea of the disconnect and the discordance being created. But let's look at this bit. So we've got and the explosion itself an asterisk on the map. So we've got this connective, this coordinate connective or conjunction being used, and which almost makes it like it's a secondary thought, like, oh, and the explosion, i.e. it's normalizing the violence, it's normalizing the explosion. This isn't just one explosion, that like the first one, it's one of many. Okay, so we've got and the explosion. Look at this enjambment. So the explosion is put on the next line and indented, which means that all of the power goes onto that. All of the focus goes onto that noun explosion. And then in the next line, we've got this sort of slightly fragmented sentence, i.e. it's not a sentence in its own right, itself an asterisk on the map. Now, it's another metaphor, isn't it? Okay, it's another punctuation mark, so it's an extension. Now, I want you to visualize an asterisk, okay? It's normally the one above the 8 on your keyboard screen. It's like a tiny little star. It looks like a little explosion because it goes out. So this metaphor is a brilliant one again, because when you use an asterisk in your text, what you're doing is you're adding a little note in, you're making a change, and guess what? Yes, so does violence, so does conflict. It's almost like saying on the map, the streets will be irrevocably different, irrevocably changed, and that is being demonstrated through this metaphor. Okay, now we get a little bit of a shift here. This is still in the first stanza. I was trying to complete a sentence in my head, but it kept stuttering. So everything else has been described from a distance in third person, and now suddenly the narrator is more involved, first person. And note the tense that he is using here. It's in past progressive. I was trying, you know, the ing version, which suggests that in this moment in the past, it was like this ongoing struggle. He's trying in an ongoing way to kind of make sense. And that's what he means when he says complete a sentence in my head. It's the inability to finish a thought, which would suggest that everything is disordered again in his mind. So it's like his mind is becoming a reflection of the conflict outside. And again, we've got another metaphor. It kept stuttering. Now, stuttering is a great word to use here. One, because it's onomatopoeic, stutter, stutter, stutter. And when obviously you stutter, you struggle to get your words out. But also it's all of those sort of plosive T's. It actually creates a sound of like conflict and gunfire, but it also is a representation of voice, i.e. he can't communicate his ideas and his feelings about the conflict that he is experiencing. Okay, so we're now moving into the second stanza, and I've just popped in a quotation from the very, very beginning. And what I want you to think about here is how it shifts from the past tense to the present tense. So the past tense is like the experience of that particular explosion going off. And now in the second stanza, it becomes broader than that. Because of that present tense moment, it becomes bigger. So he says, I know this labyrinth so well. You've got this ironic juxtaposition here, because labyrinth, and technically it's a metaphor, technically it's hyperbole as well. A labyrinth is a maze. It's something that you get lost in. So the idea of knowing it sort of is jarring. You're not meant to know your way around a labyrinth. So what he is, of course, saying here is what he knows is the confusion and the conflict of war. What he knows is the chaos. And that's accentuated, I suppose, by this impact, intensifying impact. What am I talking about? Intensifying adverb. Sorry, brain's not working. Intensifying adverb so well, which reminds us again about how much conflict they're experiencing during the Troubles. Now, what you have here is a bit more asyndetic listing, but what we've got is street names. And these street names, as well as grounding it in the kind of actual place within Belfast, but it's also creating allusion to the Crimean War, which happened in the 19th century. And so what we're really being drawn to here is the fact that war is everlasting. It doesn't matter where it is. There's always a war going around somewhere. And then we've got this rhetorical question. Why can't I escape? Now that's got a double meaning here.
because it means, why can't I make my way out of this labyrinth of streets that's full of conflict? I need to escape this moment. But it's also, why can't I escape from the violence, from the conflict, because it's everywhere. And then you've got this metaphor again, further extension. Every move is punctuated. So you've got this, like, it's again double meaning. It's like his movements are punctuated by war, but also like the streets are all punctuated by war. And again, if you think punctuation marks, like it gives boundaries to sentences. That's what punctuation does. So again, it's like this idea of looking for boundaries in a place of chaos. Okay, and then here we have the last lines of the poem. What is my name? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? A fusillade of question marks. So obviously the first thing that you're going to notice here is that we've got the structure of a rhetorical question being repeated. 3 rhetorical questions in a row. Technically, you could say it's a triad of rhetorical questions if you so wished. What is my name? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? And note the enjambment is falling on my name and then fusillade. So we're getting this kind of sense of real confusion, but it also starts to bring in ideas about identity and the idea of losing your sense of self in amongst conflict and war. And there's this juxtaposition as well between those final 2 questions, these ones, because it's where am I coming from and where am I going to? So it's like the past and the future is still confused. And it's all about creating that sense of disorientation, both literally, physically, he's trying to find his way out the streets, but also on a grander, vaster scale in life, in conflict. And then we have this final metaphor, a fusillade of question marks. And a fusillade is like a series of shots, like gunshots, missile shots. So it's another big war metaphor. But again, what is being shot? It's question marks. And the important thing here is, of course, if question marks are being shot out, and that's the end of the poem, there is no answer. So you're left in this state of confusion, lack of closure, no answers. Okay, that's it from me. Quite a heavy one to be doing on a Monday morning, but hopefully that was helpful. Give me a shout if you've got any questions. I will do my best to get back to you as timely as I can. Hope the revision's going well. Thank you for watching. Happy revising.